We're now taking a look at the 2018 budget proposals and their projections, of course. And Jide Ogunsanwo, Dr. Babajide, of course, Ogunsanwo is Channel Television's economic intelligence analyst. He joins us now to look at this. You've been digging into the 2018 budget proposal and trying to see what sense it makes, especially with the projections. What have you found?
There are several ways we could look at it, but here's what we need to know, and that is the most important estimates of the budget has gone missing. The most important estimate of the budget
has gone missing.
Has gone missing.
Which is?
I'll explain and I'll tell you what the most important estimate is, and I think it will surprise you. I think it'll surprise you. But before then, we need to realize that there are several other estimates that are important. The government's estimate of generating 6.6 trillion naira in revenue. Yes, it's an important estimate, but there's something more important than that. How we intend to pay debt service of over 2 trillion naira is important. But again, there's something even more important than that. The debt deficit, again, we look at it as debt deficit to GDP of 1.7%. We need to look at that. It's important, especially if we look at where all of this really started from. The president's first budget that was laid in 2016. Let's look at something quite strange about one of the things the president has said. And that was in 2016, in his speech, the expectation was that the deficit will be only 1.3% of GDP. By 2018. This was exactly what the president had promised. 1.3% by 2018. But in today's budget for 2018, the deficit is not 1.3%, neither is it 1.5%. The deficit is 1.7% of GDP. And so, the promises of 2 years ago haven't been met. But again, there are some promises that have been met. So let's look at part of what the president had promised in 2017. And that was that there will be rapid development in infrastructure, especially in rail. Was that promise fulfilled? Yes, it was. And so today, between May 29, 2015 and date, there's only one sector that has grown by over 100%.
Which is?
The transportation sector. And so we've seen a bag of fulfilled promises and unfulfilled...
Transportation sector with focus on the rail.
With focus on rail.
Okay.
So we've seen a bag of promises that were not fulfilled and promises that are being fulfilled.
For those that were not fulfilled, how much of that would you say will impact negatively on the 2018 budget?
A lot of it. Because, like I said earlier, a lot of it because there's an estimate that is missing. What is this estimate? It is the corruption estimate. The corruption estimate is missing in the 2018 budget. And the corruption estimate is important because it is what determines how much of the budget gets to be implemented. How much of the budget impacts you and I. Let me make myself very clear. Just recently, the United Nations of Drugs and Crime, in combination with the European Union and the National Bureau of Statistics that has the mandate to conduct official statistics for the country, recently prepared a report. In that report, it showed the 3 most important things that Nigerians are concerned about. What are these 3 things? The first, the high cost of living. Again, economists will call that inflation. The high cost of living. The second thing, the second most important thing that Nigerians are concerned about is the unemployment rate. What is the third? Is the third infrastructure? No. Is the third the budget? No. The third is corruption. And so that is why we need to understand what role will the corruption estimates play in this budget. Now, let me also make myself even more clear. What is the size of the corruption estimates? The report says corruption costs 402 billion naira. Let's try and understand what this really means. There are only two sectors in Nigeria today.
You mean the 402 billion that was a judge alleged to have been given in bribes?
In bribes, yeah. There are only two sectors in the 2018 budget whose capital allocation is greater than 402 billion naira. The Ministry of Power, Works and Housing and the Ministry of Budgets. And so today, the Ministry of Corruption is indeed bigger than the Ministry of Defense, whose capital budget is only 144 billion naira. The Ministry of Corruption is greater than the Ministry of Agric.
This does not in any way suggest that we should have a minister for corruption, though, but because that would be dire for a country like Nigeria. But looking at this corruption element that you've mentioned that is missing in the budget, if we, for instance, say that tackling that element will require agencies that are responsible for this, would you say that the agencies have failed in their duties?
We can say the agencies have failed in their duties, especially if we look at it not just from today. If we look at the corruption score from the beginning of what we call the Fourth Republic, from 1999. Again, the score based on Transparency International's own report was, our score was 1.6 over 10. Today, what is our corruption score? Not 5 over 10, not 4 over 10, not even 3 over 10. Transparency International says our corruption score today is still only 2.8 over 10. That is an F9. And so today, the most important thing we need to understand is what role will the estimates of corruption play in impacting the lives of Nigerians, in ensuring that this budget will be implemented. That's the most important estimate. But let's not get fixated on only the corruption estimates. Let us also consider, as Sam Adeyemi, who was on this program less than 2 years ago, had said, what did he say? He said, even if all of the budget was available, if all of that money was not stolen, is this budget really effective? And let's look at and interrogate that a bit more. 8.6 trillion naira.
For 2018, yes.
For 2018. Well, let's really understand what that means. And look at it this way. Let's assume this is Nigeria's population, 193 million people, which is the most recent estimate we also have.
What's that? Is that salt or sugar?
This is sugar, and I think you should give me your own drink. So, if you don't mind.
You want this to come closer to you?
Oh, yes, please do.
Of course.
Let me just take this and put that in there. Could you taste that, please? Just a little experiment.
Are we saving drinking this? I don't want to drink that much.
Just a little experiment. Just drink a bit of it.
I saw when you brought the water in, so I just might as well be part of this. And
can you taste
water?
The sugar in it?
No, there's no sugar inside. Perhaps maybe if you turn all of that sugar inside, I'll taste it.
And the reason why you can't taste the sugar in it is because the budget has little impact on the population. Let me make myself very clear. 8.6 trillion naira is equivalent to only $130 per person. Let's look at two other countries, the UK and the US. The UK's budget is 802 billion naira for only 66 million people. The UK's budget is $16,000 per person. The US budget, $4 trillion, the equivalent of 1 quadrillion naira, $13,000 per person. So in the UK, it's $16,000 per capita. In the US, $13,000 per capita. In Nigeria, only $130 per person. And so, the 8.6 trillion naira budget isn't what we really require. That is why the population can't taste the sugar. Let me explain it this way. Yes, the US has a population of 323 million people. But however, if the US population were like ours, 193 million people, what will be their budget based on their standard? Their budget wouldn't be 8.7 trillion naira. The US budget for 193 million people will be 879 trillion naira. You heard that right. Not
We're
8.7
not
trillion.
dollarizing the Nigerian economy, are we? If we have to begin to equate what happens in Nigeria with the US dollar.
We're not dollarizing the economy, but the reason why the example of the UK and the US are important are for three reasons. The first is we've practiced the parliamentary system of development. The UK, we are practicing now the presidential system of the US. And perhaps the third most important reason why we need to look at what is going on in the UK and the US is let's look at how much capital has even been imported into the country this year. $6.8 billion, 60% of all capital that comes into the country comes from the UK and the US. So it is important to understand what is going on in these economies that we have so much strong ties with, and understand why, if their budgets per person is $16,000 in the UK, $13,000 in the US, and not even up to $1,000 in Nigeria, only $130. It then clearly lets us understand that the first is the corruption estimates are missing, and the second is even if the corruption were no longer in the system, the budgets cannot be tasted by Nigerians.
Jide, I want to thank you so much indeed for talking to us. This is very revealing, as it is troubling, I would add to that. But I hope that the 2018 budgets will beat your analysis and get us some level of results. Thank you so much indeed. Jide is our economic intelligence analyst. We'll see you sometime again